After the beginning of the First World War, the Russian Imperial Army has showed its full incompetence during the battles on the Eastern Front. Despite having the largest army in the world, Russia had to retreat from Poland and Lithuania. Because of it, the Russian Empire started to conscript peasants. But that only made the situation even worse, triggering a big deficit of food in the large cities like the capital of Petrograd. This has started the February Revolution in Russia. As a result, a new provisional government has come to power, but the people already demanded more than the provisional government wanted to accept. And thus, a new Russian party called Communist Party of Russian Empire has started a civil war. And here, the nations that were suppressed by the Russian Empire had declared independence. Ukraine was also the one that declared its independence from the Russians. However, the Russian revolutionaries wanted to restore the Russian Empire in its pre-war borders, and Ukraine was one of their primary targets, because of its great grain and coal reserves. Thus, the Russian revolutionaries, also called the Soviets, had declared war on Ukrainian People's Republic, starting a first Soviet-Ukrainian war. Despite the first critical mistakes of the Ukrainian government, Ukraine allied itself with the Central Powers. And so German and Austro-Hungarian empires have sent its troops to fight against the Soviets, in exchange for Ukrainian food to the starving German and Austrian armies. And so Ukraine was liberated, and the Ukrainians had won the first Soviet-Ukrainian war, becoming German and Austrian trading partner. But in just 9 months after this, the Central Powers had lost the First World War to the Entente. Ukraine became very unstable and unprotected. And because of it, the Soviets had tried to take Ukraine one more time. Ukraine was very unprepared to the new Soviet invasion, having only 50,000 soldiers against 200,000 Soviets. Additionally, Ukraine had struggled big internal troubles. The leader of the Ukrainian state was overthrown, and a new man with the name of Simon Petlura has come to power. Right after that, Poland and the Entente powers invaded Ukraine. Some wanted to steal Ukrainian territories, meanwhile some others wanted to prevent Soviets from capturing the lands. Ukraine had found itself in a very bad position. Eventually the Soviets managed to capture Kiev and the most of the Ukraine. Meanwhile the Polish army advanced from the west, and in the late spring Ukrainian army had found itself in a total encirclement. Ukrainians had not enough ammunition and equipment. They were very tired and demoralized, but the leader of Ukrainian army, Simon Petlura, managed to buy supplies from the neutral Romania. And so the situation in the Ukrainian army had improved. The Poles and the Soviets have underestimated the Ukrainian army and had to deal with significant guerrilla resistance on the occupied Ukrainian territories. And so in June, Ukrainian army starts an offensive on the Soviets, on the cities of Kamianets-Podilsky, Broskiriv and Starokostiantyniv.
Ваша задача без попередньої артилерійської підготовки захопити підступи до міста Проскурова в 500 метрах звідси. Далі ви отримаєте підкріплення і почнете наступ на саме місто. Починайте прямо зараз.
Всім стояти, я бачу ворожу позицію. Готуйтеся до бою.
Или вот еще такой анекдот вспомнил. Попали как в яму русский, заяц и топор.
As I already mentioned, the Soviets have underestimated the Ukrainian army, and thanks to it, Ukrainians achieved their targets. At the same time, Ukrainians were capturing back their territories that were occupied by Poles. But in the late June, the Soviets have sent more troops to the front with the Ukrainians and started to counterattack. And so the Ukrainians had to retreat from Proskuriv, Grasiliv and Starokostiantiniv. However, at the same time, Ukrainians were also retreating from the Polish front. The Ukrainians have built a defensive line around the river's Bruch against the Poles. And so Ukrainians had more troops than the Soviets and started a new attack. However, the Soviets have built a defensive line near the railway station of Wapniarka, and to move further, the Ukrainians had to capture the railway station, even being outnumbered. Заряджай! Гати! Вперед! Всем в розсипну! Їде броньовик розчистити шлях! Гати! За Україну!
Рядовий, біжи за підкріпленням, а я і Василь їх затримаємо.
Так точно, лейтенант.
Ай ти, курва! Да здравствует коммунизм!
Стреляй, бандит!
Заряжай! Огонь!
Despite outnumbering the Ukrainians, the Soviets were too disorganized to properly resist the Ukrainian offensive. At the same time, even more uprisings have started to appear in Ukraine, and so even more Soviets were killed in combat. Meanwhile, anti-Soviet Russians, also called the White Guards, have started an offensive in eastern Ukraine. Additionally, the Soviet-Polish War had started, and the Soviets had to stretch their force to cover the front line with Polish army. Ukrainian army continued its summer offensive, and at the end of August, Russian White Guards and Ukrainians entered Kiev at the same time.
Командование Белой армии настоятельно просит ваши войска покинуть город Киев.
Да ніколи. Нет, ну вы слышали, что малоросы сказали?
Мы украинцы, дурень.
Целься!